Hello science fans! I think we can all agree that plastics are bad for the environment. Right? Plastics take centuries to decompose, leading to long-term pollution. They disrupt natural habitats that can harm both plants and animals. In fact, many animals mistake plastic for food, causing physical harm and death. Wildlife can also be trapped in plastic debris, leading to injuries and even fatalities. As a material, plastics absorb and release harmful chemicals, impacting ecosystems. And so governments spend a lot just to remove plastic litter from the environment. After all, plastic pollution can deter tourists, affecting local economies since plastic debris detracts from the natural beauty of recreational areas. To top it off, plastics can release toxins that can affect human health. And for localities that try to burn plastic, incinerating plastics produces harmful air pollutants. But plastic pollution can lead to a tiny but also bigger problem: microplastics. Now, why should we worry about microplastics? Before I answer this question using science, let me first introduce myself to our new viewers. I'm Chona, and I'm your resident Filipina scientist. I'm a researcher who have gone from ridge to reef and have seen how dependent we are on the environment. I'm also a teacher who teaches subjects like ecology, botany, zoology, and genetics. And my students and I find it fascinating how interconnected we are to the environment. And SHE-ensya is my science communication channel, where I try to spotlight some environmental concerns that we should start acting on. Now, should we really worry about microplastics? Microplastics are tiny plastic particles or fragments that measure less than 5 millimeters or 0.2 inches in size. They can be categorized into two main types: primary microplastics and secondary microplastics. Primary microplastics are intentionally manufactured small plastic particles that are used in various products. Examples include microbeads, which are present in some self-care products such as exfoliating facial scrubs and even toothpaste. Another would be nurdles, which are pre-production plastic pellets that are used in manufacturing. Secondary microplastics, on the other hand, are created through the breakdown of larger plastic items, such as bottles, bags, and packaging materials, due to environmental factors like UV radiation, mechanical abrasion, and weathering. And so, secondary microplastics can arise from the gradual degradation of large plastics over time. These tiny plastic particles can enter the environment through various ways. For example, primary microplastics are intentionally added to products, and they can be introduced into the environment when these products are used and the residue go down the drain. What? And then larger plastic items, such as bottles and plastic bags, can break down into smaller pieces due to exposure to sunlight and its UV radiation, heat, and physical wear and tear. But activities like driving on paved road using plastic tires or walking on synthetic surfaces can also release microplastics to the environment because of the friction between the plastic material and the ground.
No, God!
But why should we worry about microplastics? There's not a lot of long-term research about microplastics just yet. So what we have are preliminary observations and projections on what they can do once they become even more prevalent in nature. And so far, we've seen that microplastics can be mistaken for food by both marine and terrestrial animals. Ingesting these particles can lead to physical harm, blockages in the digestive system, malnutrition, and even death. Affected animals include fish, seabirds, turtles, and so many more. Microplastics can also accumulate in the tissues of organisms over time. And since smaller animals are eaten by larger animals, microplastics can actually move up the food chain, leading to higher concentrations of it in predators. Due to their size and chemical composition, microplastics can also disrupt ecosystems by altering nutrient cycling, affecting microbial communities, and interfering with the balance of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Microplastics can also absorb and then release toxins to the environment. These chemicals can include pollutants and additives, potentially exposing organisms to harmful substances. When it comes to human health, there is a concern that microplastics can enter the human body by consuming contaminated food. After all, microplastics have been found in the air already, which means people may also be exposed through inhalation, although the health implications of this exposure are still being studied. Now, the long-term effects of microplastics in human health have not yet been fully understood. Ongoing research is examining the potential consequences of prolonged exposure to microplastics. As a warning, scientists have found microplastics in strange and scary places. For example, microplastics have been discovered in Arctic sea ice, indicating that even remote and pristine polar regions are not immune to plastic pollution. This is alarming because the Arctic ecosystem is particularly sensitive to environmental changes. And then microplastics have also been found in the deep ocean, including the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest point on Earth. The presence of microplastics in these remote and largely unexplored areas raises significant concerns about the reach of plastic pollution in the planet. Microplastics have also been detected in various seafood species that are consumed by humans, such as fish, shrimp, and mussels. In fact, my own thesis students have found microplastics in the gills, stomach, and muscles of alimango or mangrove crab, in bangus or milkfish, and even in tawilis. This raises concerns about potential human exposure to microplastics through the food chain and its associated health risks. Now, I've also mentioned that microplastics have already been found in the air we inhale, especially in cities. This suggests that people living in urban areas may be exposed to airborne microplastics through inhalation. And microplastics have also been found in both tap water and bottled water, raising serious concerns about the potential health implications of taking in microplastics from our water sources. And microplastics have been detected in human bodies already. Studies have identified the presence of microplastics in our gastrointestinal tract. It's believed that microplastics can enter the body through the consumption of contaminated food and beverages. Interestingly, microplastics have also been found in human poop. These findings suggest that some microplastics consumed through food and drink can pass through the gastrointestinal tract and be excreted. But even so, microplastics have been found in other human tissue, such as lungs, liver, and lymph nodes.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
However, the mechanisms through which microplastics reach these tissues and the potential health implications are still subject of ongoing research. Scary, right? In considering microplastics could be everywhere, it would be very difficult to avoid them.
No!
Our goal instead should be to try and reduce their presence in the environment. But reducing microplastics in the environment requires a multifaceted approach, from individuals to communities to governments and large corporations. On a personal level, we can try and minimize our use of single-use plastics like disposable spoons and forks, bottles, bags, and straws. We can also dispose of plastic waste responsibly by going to recycling facilities or at the very least segregating and placing them in the correct trash bins. We should also avoid littering, as plastics that end up in the environment can eventually break down into microplastics. Let's check product labels for the presence of microplastics, especially those that we use for personal care. We have to choose products that use natural alternatives for exfoliation, such as coffee grounds and other natural materials. And when washing clothes that are made up of artificial materials, such as nylon or polyester, Let's try to use a microfiber filter or washing bag so that we lessen the introduction of microplastics to our sewage system. This prevents microplastics from our clothes from entering wastewater and ultimately the environment. We can also participate in local coastal cleanup projects so that we can lessen the presence of large plastics that can turn into microplastics in our environment. As a community, we can advocate for and support policies and regulations aimed at reducing plastic production and consumption. We have to encourage our local and national governments to implement policies that reduce the use of single-use plastics, implement stricter penalties or fees, and just generally encourage the lessening of the use of plastic products. We need to encourage businesses and industries to adopt more sustainable practices, such as reducing plastic packaging, developing eco-friendly materials, and implementing better waste management. We also have to encourage sustainable fishing and aquaculture practices that limit the use of plastic materials. Right now, the STEM community is doing research into innovative solutions for capturing and removing microplastics from the environment, as well as developing biodegradable or alternative materials. We are also proceeding with active consultations with governments and large corporations in order for us to move towards a circular economy, where materials are reused, repaired, or recycled so that we can lessen the need for more plastic. But we need more funding and support so we can do more research into the sources, impacts, and mitigation of microplastics that can help us better understand and address the issue. But what do you think? Is it too early to worry about microplastics? What other things can we do to help solve this problem? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.